You're listening to the Book Talk Today podcast, a podcast that inspires readers to obtain valuable insights to inform, educate, and improve lives. My name is Abdi. I'm an avid reader, best known for the creation of the 1 Minute Book Review community, and I'm sitting down with authors to delve deeper into the books they have written to uncover the story behind the story. Hello Book Talk Today family, and welcome back to another episode of the Book Talk Today podcast. My name is Orn, I am your host, and today we are joined by Jeff Haden. He is author of 5 non-fiction books, but today we'll be discussing his book, The Motivation Myth, How High Achievers Really Set Themselves Up to Win. Here's his book. We discuss many things, and Jeff is one of the Inc.com and LinkedIn's most widely followed influencers. As I mentioned previously, he's written 5 non-fiction books, and his most recent one is on motivation. And we discuss many things in this podcast, from whether motivation is actually an incentive to start a new project or anything that we want. What are some of the habits that we need in order to remain consistent on the goals that we set one another? How do we approach when we come up against obstacles in the things that whether it be at work or new projects, these types of things? And overall goal setting to inspiration, finding value, and how to move through life over time to learn, grow, and develop. There are many things that we discuss in this podcast, and I think they are very poignant to this idea of dispelling motivation as the impetus and the start for all of us to do anything that we want to do. So hopefully you find this podcast helpful. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I really hope you enjoy this podcast. Jeff, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you taking the time as well, because I can understand that you have many constraints on your time. And the book, The Motivation Myth, I think was an interesting one for me reading, because there seems to be a misconception around motivation, whether we need motivation to start doing anything or whether it's a result of actually just taking action, and then motivation gets increased as a result of taking action. So I think it'd be great just to talk about your experiences with writing this book, or the concept of motivation, how you came to write about it.
Where it really came from is that I write about success a lot. I write about goal achievement. I talk to and interview lots of highly successful people in a broad variety of fields. So that means that lots of people will write to me and say, I have things I want to achieve. I have goals that I want to achieve, but I can't find the motivation. And it always bothered me that people would say, I can't find it. And so I kind of balanced that against my conversations with the people who had achieved really high goals, and none of them ever looked for motivation, nor did they wait for some like lightning bolt to strike them, or they found their passion and they had all the motivation they needed to carry them forever. It was developed through having an interest, deciding that you wanted to pursue it, deciding that you wanted to get better at whatever it is you did, and then enjoying these small successes along the way that allowed you to get to the next day, which is really all motivation should do, is get you to the next day so that you can wake up and do the things that you need to do again. So the real concept of the book is that you don't find motivation, it finds you, and you don't get motivation from somewhere else, you create it through action. So most people flip it around and think they need the motivation before they can act. And really, all you have to do is get started. And if you get started the right way and you follow the right processes and plans, and if you really try, you will get motivation from the effort you put out and the however small wins that you enjoy. So motivation is something that you create. It is not something that you get from some external source.
And it's interesting you talked about the process and the systems. And I know in the book you talk about some systems and how to approach taking action the right way. Has that been your experience as well, speaking with some high achievers about the actual systems that they have?
So if you think about motivation, really it's a virtuous cycle. So you act, you do something, you work at it, you get a little success, you improve a little bit, whatever it is, that makes you feel good because we all like to do things that we are good at and we hate to do things that we aren't good at. So if you don't improve even a little bit within a short period of time, then you're not going to get that little burst of success and that happy feeling that causes you to say, wow, this is working. I am getting somewhere. I am improving. That's exciting, which is enough to get you up the next day to go again. So I use this example all the time, so forgive me, but say you decide that you want to run a marathon, and you're not a runner and you don't run at all right now. If your process does not allow you within, say, a week or two to see some improvement and to feel like, okay, this is kind of working. I know it's 26 miles is a long way, but I feel like I have gotten a little bit fitter. I've gotten a little better stamina. I feel a little more comfortable with this. I can see that this is working. If you don't get that from your process, then you're going to quit because the distance from here, which is where you are, to there, which is where you want to go, seems insurmountable because you're putting out some effort and not getting something back. And so typically what I tell people is if you want to start something that it will be hard to achieve, you kind of need to go hard at first. And that's contrary to what a lot of people think, where you ease your way in and, you dip a toe in the water and you test and you whatever. But when you just dip a toe, you don't get wet enough to get any improvement out of it. And an example I used in the book is I wanted to ride a Gran Fondo. They're just mass participation cycling events. And so I had only had like 4 months to train for it, and it was 100 and some miles and 4 mountains, and it was hot death. And so I talked to a guy that lived near me who's a professional mountain biker, and I said, what should I do? And so he set me out a training program, but the first day I had to go ride for a couple hours. And I had not ridden at all. And so I thought it was crazy. I thought it was stupid. I thought there's no way I can do this, but I also thought, okay, but he says that's what I should do, and he should know, so let me try. And it was horrible for the first couple weeks, but after the first couple weeks, while I wasn't ready to ride the event, I had gotten better. And I had seen some improvement, and I felt like, okay, this is working for me. The whole thing is you need a process that is almost guaranteed to allow you to improve, and you need to go at it kind of hard at first. And then, and hopefully we'll talk about this, and you also need to commit that you are going to do it for at least 2 weeks, no matter what.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing is because people feel as if they have to ease their way in or they have to over-plan it. I think over-planning is one of the main things, main barriers between people actually starting anything is because they think to themselves, okay, I need to have this in place, this in place, this in place before I even start. And I like the example you gave about cycling because I love to run long distances. And I remember when I was training for my first long distance run, I thought to myself, okay, I'll start with sort of like a 10K sort of day and then sort of get into it. And then I actually spoke to someone who had done one of them. He just said to you just need to go out for a long period of time. You just need to go out for hours and just get the leg time, just get the time out on your legs. It doesn't matter how quickly you're going. You just need to, commit to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting how that works. The other thing that people mess up is they want to overplan, but they also want a custom, bespoke, almost special, individualized program for them because, we're all unique and we're all individuals and we're all special. And so they want something crafted that somehow fits every possible aspect of what they would like to do. And rarely is what you would like to do, if it's something hard, going to be what will actually work. Usually you have to do what you don't want to do. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in the situation where you wanted to get there. You may not have wanted to go out and run for hours, but putting miles in your legs was exactly what you needed to do. That's another thing that people will do is, let's pretend on the marathon example, if you go to your local gym and there's a personal trainer there and you say, hey, I want to run a marathon. Typically what they'll do is they'll say, okay, what's your level of fitness? What have you done? What do you like to do? What do you enjoy? And they try to create something that you will think is fun. But fun typically doesn't get you to some huge goal, especially not at first. It becomes fun when you gain some level of expertise, and in this case, you gain some level of fitness, and you become better at it. Then it becomes fun because, I can go do that. I can go run 10 miles, and it's not easy, but it's kind of fun. And it's fun to have finished because you can look back and say, wow, I did something really, really hard. So that beginning period will never be fun. And if it's really, really fun, it's probably not going to get you where you want to go. So that's why I always say, if you're going to do something hard and you're going to embark on some long achievement journey, you need to follow the 2-week rule, which is I'm going to have a process, I'm going to lay it out, I know what I need to do every day, and I commit to doing that for 2 weeks. Because if you start out the first day, you're terrible. The second day, if it's fitness related, you're worse because now you're sore and you're also trying to do it. The third day is horrible. But by the second week, you're starting to see some improvement. You're starting to get fitter. You're starting to kind of bed into what the thing is. And at the end of 2 weeks, then you can take a clear-eyed look at it and say, is this something I want to continue? And you'll have a sense of, how is it working for you? Do you really like it or not? Is it something that's fulfilling and gratifying? Is that where you want to go? But it's an objective decision. Whereas on the second or third day, it's not objective. It's totally subjective, and it's because it sucks. And you want to quit. And so if you can't commit to saying, all right, I'm going to do this for 2 weeks, no matter what, I'm going to give it that go, and I will evaluate it then. If you can't commit to that, then whatever that goal is you say you want to achieve, you don't really want to achieve it. Because 2 weeks is not that long in whatever it may be, whether it's learning to play an instrument or learning a language or doing cold calls for sales. I don't care what it is. If you can't do something for 2 weeks that is proven to work for other people, and again, we're not that different. What works for you will in large part work for me. So if you tell me what to do with something and you've done it before and succeeded, I should pretty much follow that. Later on, when I gain expertise, I can adapt it a little bit to my individual circumstances. But early on, we're all kind of the same. So 2 weeks, stick with it. Then you can have a clear-eyed, objective look at, is this working for me, and is it something I really want to pursue? And if at the end of that time you say, you know what, I got better, I feel good about this, I did improve, but I don't think this is right for me, it's not something I want to pursue, and there's something else I would prefer to try, that's fine. And you should stop, because you've made an objective decision. And life is too short to follow things that aren't going to be enjoyable for you. But that 2-week thing is about enough time to figure it out objectively.
I think it's enough time to figure out as well is whether you've actually made some significant improvement as well. Because even if you've kept at it for the 2 weeks and you're going to do it, at least you have some sort of foundation of how you're going to approach it going forward as well, which I think is really important.
Yeah, and almost always you will improve some. If you're putting in the right time and the right effort, you're going to improve some. I've never done anything where I didn't at least get a little bit better if I gave it a good, sincere 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. One of the questions I had relating to that actually was, you've obviously studied a lot of high performers. And one of the things that a lot of people deal with, or the negative side of starting anything, is the boredom and the monotony of starting anything from new. How have those high performers, how do they deal with that feeling of monotony and boredom, especially at the beginning?
Well, there's two answers to that. The first one is something that I like to call the goal you think you want is not the goal that you actually need to embrace. So let's say it's you and you want to run a marathon. The goal is, to cross the finish line, stand there, get your finishing medal, feel all good, your friends cheer for you and all that cool stuff. That's what you say you want. What you really have to want is to go out every day and follow your training plan. You have to want to train. That's what you have to want. And if you want that, then the finish line is a byproduct of what you said you wanted. And so, if it's people that sell, you may want to sell, I don't know, your quota may be $1 million a month. That may be your goal. What you have to want is to go out every day and cold call or follow up leads or whatever the process is that you follow in terms of sales. You have to want to do those things. So the really successful people that I've talked to, they had big goals, but then they figured out what it would take to get there, and they found a way to want those things. And what's interesting about it is their achievement, or their sense of achievement and fulfillment, came from doing those things on a daily basis. So if we go back to you in a marathon, you want to run 26 miles on a certain date, but you have to want, say today, to go out and run 7 miles at a certain pace. You've got some kind of metric. If at the end of that time you have accomplished that, you accomplished your goal for the day. And it doesn't matter that you haven't run the marathon yet, because you did what you set out to do today. And if you let that be your metric, Then you get to feel good today. If you do it again tomorrow, you get to feel good tomorrow. And so each one of those daily wins is actually, it's a whole lot more fun along the way, because that moment when you run a marathon and you finish, it's fun for about 2 hours. And then it kind of goes away, and you're like, oh, okay.
And then you want to do something else.
Yeah, that was cool, but, or you start to question yourself and you say, yeah, but I really wanted to run, 3 hours and 10 minutes and it took me 3:12 and oh, that's awful. And, you end up in all these other places. Those achievements, no matter how big, the satisfaction is fleeting because we are kind of programmed to move on to what's next. So buy into that and say, I'm going to use my process as my metric, and if I do that every day that I do what I set out to do, I get to feel good, I get to feel successful, I get to feel like I won. And if you stack enough of those days up, you will get to where you think you want to be. So in a long-winded way, the answer to your question is the really successful people that have done something that took a long time to accomplish, they found a way to enjoy and look for gratification in the daily process, not in the sweep of the whole thing in that finish line that they would get to.
I think it's also building in a personal reward system. I think a lot of people, what they do, especially I find this when people ask me, and some of my followers ask me about productivity or scheduling. When they schedule their calendar, they almost do it as if they have to do it rather than they want to, or they can see the benefit of doing it. It's almost like they're a teacher to themselves. They're stricting, they're whipping themselves into doing things. And I think people sometimes approach it in the same way when they set big goals. It's a burden upon them rather than something that they actually want to do.
Yeah, it's been ages ago, but he's done this in other areas, but Arnold Schwarzenegger, I imagine you're familiar with, he said, well, you never know. He said he couldn't wait to get to the gym back when he was a bodybuilder because in his mind, every repetition put him one step closer to winning whatever contest that he was going to enter. And so it wasn't that he had to perform a certain number of reps on an exercise. It was that he got to do that, and it was exciting because that was all a building block towards where he wanted to go. So if the process you create or the routine you set up for yourself feels so burdensome that it's something you feel like you have to slog your way through, then one, you're not giving it your best, clearly, because you're not excited about doing it in the least. And I'm not saying you have to be totally thrilled and enthused every minute of the day, but you have to at least be able to see in your mind, okay, I know why I'm doing this, and it is leading me to a place that I want to get to. And as long as you can keep that in mind, then it's a lot easier and it doesn't feel as burdensome because you feel like you have some purpose to what you do. And that's a really important thing when you set a goal, is to know exactly what it is you're trying to achieve, because that should inform the processes and routines and steps you take in order to get there. A lot of people will set one goal and then they'll follow this other process that will never get them there and get frustrated along the way. And if you don't want to follow the process that will get you there because it doesn't seem fun or interesting or exciting or too burdensome, then you probably don't want the goal. And that, again, is okay. It's fine not to want the goal. Why waste your time on 2 years or whatever it is of effort for something that you really didn't want to do, only to feel kind of bad at the end because you didn't get there and you feel defeated and you feel bad about yourself and all that other stuff. So it's okay to give up on things if you're doing it for objective reasons. It's not necessarily okay to do it if you just get subjective about it, because it's really easy to quit when you feel down and defeated.
How does one approach that feeling? Because I think a lot of reasons, or one main reason why a lot of individuals feel like stopping is because they have sunk cost bias. They've put a lot of time and effort into something and they don't want to stop it because they feel as if they have already invested a lot of time into it. What's your approach? How have you found others approach the idea of actually quitting? Because I guess people associate quitting with failure. So where's the relationship between quitting and failure, and how do you make an assessment about whether you continue?
There's a couple answers to that. The first one is that I don't think that anyone goes through their life. It's easy to think if you embark on a certain path that because you have to put so much time and effort and maybe money into it, that this should carry you a long, long way, and it might even be a lifelong pursuit. But very few of us actually live our lives that way. You go in little chunks, and you may be in this career path for a while. You may shift to another. You may pick up a side interest. You may do whatever. Things change along the way, and that's actually a really fun thing. And so I like to call it being a serial achiever. There's nothing wrong with saying, again, if we go back to you, if you like to run, you might have decided that, you loved running marathons, and that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do that the rest of my life, and I'm going to be whatever. And then 5 years in, you could say, I've kind of had enough of this. You could look back and say, wow, but I've put so much time and effort and pain and sweat and toil into this that quitting, man, what a waste. Well, no, because you got everything out of that experience that you wanted while you were doing it. And if there is something else that now has sparked your interest and that would seem more fulfilling and gratifying, cool. It's okay to shift. So you're really not quitting, you're just shifting. Now, if you're quitting because, again, if you're quitting for not objective reasons, that's a whole nother issue. But if you've wrung but if you've gotten to the point where the effort involved does not match up with the fulfillment, gratification, financial remuneration, whatever it is that you're trying to get out of something, if those don't line up anymore, then you're not quitting. You're making a sensible choice to do something else that would make your life better in whatever way you choose to do that. So that's probably the biggest thing, is to stop thinking of it as quitting if you've got some other interest you want to pursue, and just see it as shifting. And that whole sunk cost thing, all that time you spent doesn't go away. Because if you spent your time in one industry and then you shift to another, you bring a whole set of experiences and perspectives and background and connections. You bring all that stuff with you to whatever it is you're doing new. If you go from running marathons to, you switch over to cycling, well, you know how to suffer. You know how to push yourself. You know how to grind. You know all those things. And what's cool about it is if you've succeeded at one thing, the best thing you bring with you is the knowledge that if I put in the time and effort and I stick with it, I can accomplish things. And so if you start on something else that's hard, you start from a place of, okay, this is going to be hard. I know it's going to be hard, but I know I can do this because I have done it before and I know how to do it. I know how to take the steps that will get me there. And so it's shifting, it's not quitting, and you haven't abandoned all the things that you worked on, because you bring a lot of those things with you, and it will make you better at whatever else you decide to do.
Yeah, I had that fear in the past. Regarding athletic pursuits, because I think athletic pursuits are really interesting when trying to establish connections between motivation and goals. I think they're unique in their own field, because it's so much to do with the mental aspect. But I got really good at playing golf, and then I just stopped playing. And I had a friend recently who he still plays, and he says I quit and I just sort of was done with it. And I'm like, no, I just had different interests. Now I take up long distance running. But the thing that for me to try and understand, or I think that a lot of people need to understand, is the systems that you've had for yourself to practice can be transferred. So monotonous practice, or just spending time on something for a long period of time, and being able to deal with boredom is so important in that respect.
What's interesting about that is that there's two different types of quote unquote quitting. There's you decided that long distance running was more fun, and so you stopped playing golf. That's cool. There's you decided long distance running is fun, you got in really, really good shape, and then you got lazy for a month or so and didn't really go and run, and you kind of had to start over. You don't really start over, but it feels like it, because you go out and you run, you think, I was so much fitter before, and I was faster, and I was whatever, and I've lost all that. And it's what I like to call the whole idea of, in those cases, you need to stop starting over. So if you have some long-term goal, it's okay to have some little lulls and breaks, but if you take too long of a break, then you have to start over and you waste time, and that's demotivating because you realize how much time that you've lost. So there is a big difference. If you decide that, I've done the golf thing and I might go out and play recreationally for fun every once in a while with friends, and it'll just be a hoot, and I don't really care if I'm not as good, because I don't really care, that's great. But if you're trying to be on the golf path, then it's really important to stop starting over, because that sucks. If we're talking about fitness things, if you've been working out for a while and you get to a certain level and then you stop for a month and you come back, it's like, wow, where did it all go? It's really hard to build and it's really easy to give it up, which is why the whole idea of processes and routines is really important, because it helps you with that. Or if you do want to take breaks along the way, if you build that into your program and you know what you're doing and that's part of the process, and it's maybe part of recovering a little bit or freshening up or whatever it might be, well, then that's okay. But if it's just, I got lazy and I didn't feel like running for a month and now I want to get started again, that's horrible. But it's okay. Again, that's an experience that you develop and you realize that that's how it works. And so when you do start over and it's not very much fun, at least this is how it works. But I can get back to where I was. It's okay. It's just kind of sucky now, but I can get back to it. So, and that's true professionally. It doesn't have to be fitness. It's true with all sorts of different pursuits.
Yeah, I think it just transfers that mentality and that process, definitely. One interesting thing I wanted to ask you about is we live in a current climate where hacking has become a thing. What are the quick tips to do this? What are the quick tips to do that? It's almost like we are looking for shortcuts in every single thing that we do. What are the downsides of this type of mentality when it comes to actually reaching your goals and maintaining motivation?
It's a great point. It is tempting to look for a shortcut and to assume that there is some way that you can hack your way to an outcome. Very rarely does one of those things exist whenever it's a difficult to achieve goal. It usually just means that, okay, I know how to peel a banana better, or, I know how to crack an egg better, or something like that. There's a difference between optimization, which would be one of those things, and like hacking your way to some successful thing. And so probably the best way for me to illustrate it, when I was young, my grandfather, he worked on a farm, and farmers work hard all day. And so in the summer times, I would sometimes go and visit, which didn't mean vacationing with my grandparents. It meant I had to work on the farm because he wasn't going to take off. And so one day I was probably 12, and we were out, and I think we were digging up some tank that was buried in the ground, and I got tired really fast. And so I started coming up with ideas. So in a way I was trying to hack this thing, even though I didn't realize it. And so I, asked about whether we could use a tractor for something, and I kept coming up with ideas. My grandfather's listening, but we're still shoveling. And finally he looks at me and he says, "Son, I know you're smart. I know you're trying to help. I know you're trying to think your way through this, but sometimes you just have to dig the effing hole." And I've never forgotten that, because sometimes the only way to the place you want to go, you just have to dig the hole. And there is no shortcut. And actually there's research that shows you'll like this, I'll send you the link later, ultra endurance athletes, like people that there's some marathon or some long distance running event in the Sahara where people go out for like 5 days.
What is it called? It's the Marathon Disables. Marathon
That sounds
Disables?
right.
Yeah.
Yep. And so some researchers talked to the people that participate in that, and they asked them about coping strategies and how do you stay, going and whatever. And oddly enough, the people that didn't try to search for alternatives along the way, like, is there a different way I could do this? Or, the ones that just said, I have two choices. I can either keep going or I can quit. And I don't want to quit, so I'm just going to keep going. So in effect, what they were doing was digging the hole. Those people tended to finish at a much higher rate than the people that were mentally searching for things, because sometimes you can't do anything but dig the hole. And the process of looking for another way and not being able to find it, that alone is defeating. So now not only is what you're trying to do really hard, but you also feel defeated because you can't figure out a way around it. And so the hack thing, the problem with that is if you start searching for too many alternatives, then you actually lose motivation because none of those work out. And you think, well, I could try this. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, I could try this. That didn't work. So now not only is it hard, but now it's hard because you've also failed at some of those other things. So I think it's okay to try to optimize, but you should optimize based on objective data and feedback that you get from the performance that you are engaged in. Not from, wow, this is hard, so let me look around and see if there is some sneaky way that somebody's figured out so that I don't have to do the hard work.
I think optimization only happens once you put in a certain amount of hours.
Yep.
Otherwise, there's no data, like you said, to back up that optimization. Like if someone's just started to, let's say, run on the first week and they're looking for optimization on whatever it be, cadence or new types of shoes, there's no existing data that you can go from.
Nope. And you're just making it up. Or you're letting emotion guide what you think you should do instead of something data. And I don't mean you have to be cold and clinical and, some kind of robot. But if you're making a decision about how to change something that is important to you or that will help you to get to a goal, you should be changing it based on objective things that you can look at and say, okay, this truly is not working. Let me try this. This truly is working. I need to double down on that. You have to know enough about what you're doing to be able to decide whether what you're doing is working well for you or not. And the only way to get there is through a lot of time and effort.
Where does the 10,000 hour rule apply to this? Because I feel like it's become overpopularized by Malcolm Gladwell with the whole, it takes 10,000 hours to mastery. Do you believe in that concept of the 10,000 hour rule? Or do you think it's another prescribed time? Or do you just think it's all a bit of a make-up exercise?
I think that in a general sense, it is probably accurate if you take it just to mean that anything really difficult to master is going to take considerable time in order to master it. So I'll accept that part. But it isn't a magic number, because let's say both of us are going to learn to play guitar. And so and I'm going to put in 10,000 hours, and so are you. If you are deliberate about your practice, if you are focused, if you have a process for practicing, if you're constantly getting feedback from yourself, if nothing else, about how you're doing and how you should change, if your practice is deliberate and thoughtful, your 10,000 hours are going to kill mine if mine is just mindless strumming away and waiting for the time to pass, because I'm somehow going to magically become a master. So time is important, but what matters just as much is how thoughtful and deliberate and focused you are in the time that you spend. And there's way more research than I ever need to cite about that. But if you look at anyone that's really successful, especially like at a physical skill, they're not just mindlessly, let's say it's basketball. The best free throw shooters are not just going to a court every day and sitting there tossing up free throws for an hour and saying, okay, I put in a lot of time. It's deliberate, it's focused. There's a constant feedback loop going on in their head. They're adjusting. They're trying to perfect. It's all a quest for optimization. And probably what separates the people who really do achieve at a high level from the ones that don't is that ability to stay focused on deliberate practice and to keep that feedback loop going and make it where they're critical of what they are doing in a good way, if that makes sense. There's a race car driver here. I'm sure not familiar with NASCAR, but it's stock car racing in the U.S. And there's one of the drivers there he says, they race basically on ovals, so it's round and round and round and round. And I said to him, how do you stay focused for 4 hours doing that?
It's 4 hours.
Sometimes the race will last 4 hours, and so it's endless. And now there's caution periods and, stuff happens, but they're out there forever. And so I said, how do you stay focused for that long? And he said, I really don't think about it. And I don't think that I'm necessarily focused, but that's probably what separates out the people that reach the top level from the ones that don't, is the fact that they are able to concentrate for that long and never really let up. Because, every corner, you're right on the edge of control. And if you are totally focused on that, then you're going to lose control, or you're not going as fast as you could possibly go. Sorry, I went around that's a Southern American expression, is that I went all the way around the barn, and now I'm going to sum it up. But the point of that is that the hours matter, but it's really what you're doing with the hours that is going to make the difference with where you go.
I'm currently reading this book, actually, you brought up that point, Peak by Anders Ericsson and Robert Poole, where they talk about this idea of deliberate practice. So the individuals that you've spoken to, that you've interviewed, what's their approach to deliberate practice? Is it more of a scheduling thing? How do they maintain focus? And you talk about that feedback loop. Is it all of those elements together for deliberate practice?
I don't know if it's... I know people that do different things in terms of scheduling. The majority of people I know that are trying to refine a skill and optimize a skill, they're pretty routine about it. They have a set period in the day that they tend to do what they do. You know, it's part of their lifestyle and it's a routine. But I know a few that they're kind of floppy about it, but they will make sure that they do what they need to do each day. I think that's probably harder because once you get in the habit of delaying something that you know you need to do, it's really hard to keep delaying it. And sooner or later, you don't do it at all. But they're masters at sitting down, tuning everything else out, and doing whatever it is they need to do and keeping that feedback loop going. If it's a physical skill or if it's an athletic pursuit or something else like that. But it's also true for people that I know that are speakers. You know, when they rehearse, it's full on, even though they may just be in a room, it's a full on, every gesture, every motion, they are rehearsing as if it is live, and they are critiquing themselves as they go the entire time and trying to sense what would be working, what would not be working. So you can do that with anything. It could be, you know, again, we use, like, if you're a salesperson, you know, you can refine your approach. You can get better at adapting to what you read from a potential customer and knowing how to shift from that. That is a skill that takes time and effort and practice. And, you know, when you're done, you think about what you just talked about, think about how it went, think about the cues you read or misread, all of those kinds of things. So it's the really successful people are constant critiquers of themselves, not in a I'm really hard on myself, but on a, okay, how did that go? What was good? What was bad? What could be better? And then they're good at putting into place what they thought could be better and experimenting with that and then seeing what happens after that. Because a lot of people can say, yeah, that didn't go very well. I should have done so-and-so, but then they don't actually put that into place next time. You know, they go back to whatever was the routine. So that critical step of, I could have done that better, here's what I should have done, I will then do that next time, then that gives you more data and more feedback, and that continues to let you optimize.
Do you think a lot of people want to be successful, but they don't actually gain the skills in order to be successful? They're so focused on the actual outcome that they forget about there's actual skills behind it. Because I feel like there's a lot of people out there that look to the idea of being successful, but they sort of overlook the skills that you need to gain.
I would say that's true, and I also think that a lot of times whatever the definition of success is actually really fuzzy. And so, you know, there are a lot of people that want to be, for want of a better way to put it, celebrities in whatever field they are in. Even if it's, you know, I want to be seen as the best salesperson in my company, or I want to be seen, whatever it is, people want to be quote unquote famous for what they do, as if that is some kind of tangible result. And so you're never going to get there, because I don't even know what that looks like. And no one I know that set out to become famous, or I'm sorry, nobody I know that is famous for an achievement set out to become famous. They set out to be whatever it is that they are, and that actually caused them to gain some kind of public notoriety or fame or whatever else it is. So that underlying your question is also the idea that there are a lot of people that they have that goal, but then they think there's some way that someone hacked their way to it. So like, oh, but he had connections that I didn't have, or oh, he went to that university and I didn't go there and that's a problem, or oh, well, his parents have money, or all of those things. And I know that sometimes is helpful to people, but in large part, the people that achieve worthwhile things, like meaningful, tangible, actual outcome-based things, and not, I don't know, Kardashian-based things, at least in terms of celebrity. I know they're all fabulously successful business people as well, but they started out just being in the business of being famous for being famous. The people that achieve things, they were setting out to achieve that thing, not to become famous in the process. So I think sometimes we get hung up on that. Or you look at how, I'm going off on a tangent and I'm sorry about that, but you look
That's
at
right.
somebody's Instagram feed and you assume that that is their real life, and it's really not. But then you decide you want those things, but do you really want those things? Or do you really want to be the person that looks in the mirror and says, I'm living the life that I want to live. I'm achieving success the way I define success, and the definition should be different for everyone. And I'm working on things that are meaningful to me or the people that I care about or whatever else. Those are the people that are successful, regardless of whether they're wealthy or famous or anything else.
I think that requires obviously a lot of thought and time, and I think an easy option is that a lot of people just go for what other people have, which is perhaps where the motivation people get demoralized or demotivated, is they just look at others and they think, oh, I just want what they have, and they don't actually ask themselves the critical question about what they actually want.
Yeah, I have a friend, a good example of that. I have a friend who runs a construction company, and he got into that because he liked building houses. He liked the physical act of building houses. And he got to a point where his company was so successful, at least in standard terms, because he was running it, that he never was on a job site. He was always out meeting customers. He was getting supplies. He was doing all the things that, you hear people say you shouldn't work in your business, you need to work on your business. But he liked working in the business. And so he was miserable. And he finally realized why. And so now he has about, I think, instead of 150 or so people, he has about 40. And 2 days a week at least, he gets to go and he works on job sites. And he's happy now. He's not as big. He doesn't make as much money, but he still does really well. But he's kind of blended that, okay, I'm successful in monetary terms. I'm taking care of my family. I'm having some of that success, but I also get to go and do the things that I like to do sometimes, and the reason that I got into this business in the first place. And so he started out wanting what other people had, which was large construction companies, and he ended up having what he wants to have, which is one that blends his personal and his financial goals and is a fulfilling life.
That's a really nice story, because that requires a lot of self-awareness, because that prioritizes perhaps contentment over outside validation.
And it also, yeah, exactly. You have to be willing to, because people looked at it. He said to me one time, he said, people have asked me, you okay? I know you don't have as many people. I know you're not as working on as many jobs. Like, people thought he was failing because his company had over time shrank. And actually he was thriving because he was doing what he wanted to do, and in a very successful way. So you have to also be willing to say, all right, other people may not understand what I'm doing, or they may not get my definition of success, but if you follow other people's definitions of success, you end up living their lives and not yours.
Which I think is a common theme amongst the current environment that we have now, on whether it be social media or wherever it might be. I think it's a lot of people are living other people's view of what success might be. And it's also something as well, I think I wanted to ask you this question. David Epstein wrote this book called Range.
Yep.
I don't know if you've read it. Yeah,
Yep.
He talks about this idea of range versus specialization. What's the relationship between range and specialization between high achievers? And I don't know if you touched upon it in this book specifically, but the individuals that you've done case studies on and interviewed, were they sort of specialized in a certain field, or did they have range and sort of get specialization later on down the road?
It starts in a variety of ways. Some people are generalists and they end up specializing to a degree. Other people specialized, and because of the position they found themselves in, had to generalize. If you're, I don't know, say you're a programmer and you come up with some awesome app and you want to build a company out of it, sooner or later you don't get to just program. You end up having to be a leader, and there's other things that you have to do. And so it changes, but I guess my real answer to that question is, I don't know anybody that is, let me rephrase that. People are too good to specialize. You have too many things that you could possibly do to only focus on one thing at the exclusion of everything else. And plus, I don't think that's a very fun life. And so I, you know, David's point is kind of the generalists win, and I think he's right. If for no other reason than because when you reach a certain level, if you don't have a little bit of a broader range of skills to support that one area of focus, you're going to fail, because otherwise you're giving all that control to other people, or you're starting to just be shaped by what other people do and say to help you, and you can't, you don't get a more holistic look at what you do. Plus, I think you would just get really, really bored after a while if you only specialized on one thing. And I don't see that that's fun. Most of the really successful, like Venus Williams is a good example. Obviously, great tennis player, but her dad wouldn't let she and Serena just be tennis players even when they were young. They had to have other interests. They had to have other pursuits. So she's got a couple master's degrees. She owns a clothing company that she actually works in. You know, it's not some thing she just put her name on. She runs an interior design and architecture company. She actually works in that. And so she's got this balance of things that she's convinced helps her be better at all of them, because she can bring some of the business stuff to the tennis side. Obviously, her tennis notoriety helps her on the business side. She's learned how to better be part of a team and lead a team through the business side, which helps her with the team that she has for tennis. And so all those things kind of dovetail in a way that maybe you don't see at first. So I'm a big fan of generalists. I think it's okay to have one thing that you're trying to be super good at, but you better have a few things that you're trying to be kind of good at, if for no other reason that it makes your life a little fuller and richer and a little bit more fun. And if one thing doesn't work out, you have other stuff that you can fall back on as well.
Yeah, you have transferable skills, which I think is really important. And I think that's what I think a lot of people, especially younger individuals, like the age range of this podcast was 18 to 34. And a lot of the things that I try and promote is having a range of interests and a range of skills, because then you can transfer skills between different things, and eventually you'll come across something that is your main skill, but you can always learn something from different skills and pick that and use that framework in different ways. I
did a talk at a college last year, and the students, they were all getting ready to graduate, and they were talking about first jobs or whatever, and they were really concerned because they thought their first job set the tone for their entire career for the rest of their lives. And I said, that's not how it works. You're going to go through lots of fits and starts. And then one guy, it was during the Q&A part, one guy said, but I don't want to take a job that's, not really going to be, the right thing for me, that's going to set me up and all that other stuff. And I said, here's the thing. And it fits with what you were just talking about. Whatever job you take, I don't care what it is. If you go in there and say, obviously I need to work hard because I'm being paid. So first and foremost, that's your job. But also, there are things that I can learn here, no matter what it is. If he gets hired to go dig holes with me and my grandfather, well, you can learn how to dig holes. You can learn how my grandfather is a leader or not. You can learn how to work with me in terms of teamwork. You can learn how to optimize your process so that this goes better. You can pick up things that you will transfer with you the rest of your life just by watching people. And if you aspire to be a leader, then you can, if nothing else, look at the people who are in charge of you and say, okay, that was really smart, or that was really dumb, I'll never do that, or that's interesting how he handled that, or okay, that's how this process works here, and you'll take that with you somewhere else. So you're in college now, and you're paying someone to teach you. If you see your first job as a thing where, wow, I'm getting paid, and I get to learn, you just flipped that on its head. And if you approach it that way, you'll carry some of that stuff with you the rest of your life, even if you don't work in that industry ever again, because a lot of the fundamentals of work carry through the whole way through. And so I don't know how many of them really took it in, but I thought I was being pretty profound.
Yeah, it is.
But that's been true, at least for me, because every job that I've had, even all the way back to my grandfather, which wasn't a job because it wasn't paid, but it was work, I took stuff with me from that. And some of them I probably could have learned more from it had I been focused on, hey, wow, this is an opportunity for me to not just make money, but I could actually learn some stuff here that I will someday use.
I think the point that you made about observing what people do and making an observation about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing is so important, because that's what I did when I did my first job. Mostly on the not to do in respect to my first job, but that is almost more valuable than just seeing it as a paycheck.
Yeah, you don't really, when people do things well, you notice it, but in some ways you kind of expect it, especially early on in your career. You expect the people above you to be good at their jobs. You assume that that's the case. You find out later it's not necessarily true. But early on you think, wow, he's in that job, he's my boss, he must be smart and capable and all that other stuff. And then you realize later that, no, not every boss is great. But you can pick up a whole lot of stuff that you don't want to do if you're paying attention. And you don't just have to see it as personal, like, well, I would never talk to me that way, or something like that. You can see how they deal with other people. You can see how all that stuff is easily learnable. And the cool thing is you are getting paid to learn instead of having to pay someone to teach you.
Yeah. And it's that real life experience I feel like is really important. I think a lot of people tend to overthink their first job. I know. Yep. I did when I went into my first graduate scheme job in the UK. I overthought it. Then I thought, oh my God, I'm going to pick this and I'm going to be burdened by this for X amount of years, and then realized 3 years later that I'm no longer doing it. Yeah. So what did I worry about in the first place?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's how life is, though. Every decision seems momentous. It's only in hindsight that you realize that, I could have gone 5 different ways with that and it would have been fine.
Yeah, it's just having that perspective, though, because I think, especially when you're younger, I think the more, and that's why I think in respect to the range and specialization conversation, it's range teaches you that it's okay to do multiple things. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you sort of have all your eggs in one basket, you almost feel too tense to do anything else.
If you're doing 5 different things, you're a generalist with 5 different interests. Think like a specialist when you are working on one of them and say, okay, this is really important. This is my thing. I'm going to focus. I'm going to give feedback to myself. I'm going to focus on learning. And then when you pop out of it and you go to something else, then be a specialist at that. So it's a temporary mindset shift. But your overall goal is to get better at several things, and sooner or later they will dovetail and they will all feed on each other, and the sum will actually be greater than the parts.
Yes, that's always the case. And I think it's consistency. And I think when in respect to motivation, I know we talked about this at the beginning, it's just getting started is the hardest thing, because once you get started, there's that positive feedback loop, and then the sum just adds up over time, and then you have the benefit of in retrospect looking back and being like, wow, I actually did quite a bit. Yes. But you don't think about that when you're thinking on a day-to-day basis, because you just think, okay, I need to do this, and then that's something for you to worry about in the future, about what the gains from that was.
Exactly.
How do you go about approaching goals then? What's the best way you found approaching goal setting? Because I feel like a lot of people put too much emphasis on goal setting. I know there's different ways that you can approach it. You can approach it in the sense of identity related goals, being the person that you want to become, or like specific outcomes that you actually want to achieve. So what have you found it to be the best way to approach it? Is it a mix of two?
Yes, and also whenever possible, if you can make what seems like a professional goal also have some personal meaning as well, then you're much more likely to stick with it. In that sense. So if your goal is to, say you want to get promoted into a leadership position, that's your goal. It's not a huge goal, but it's an important goal. And part of the reason for that is you like helping people, and you like seeing other people succeed, and you like being part of a team that does cool things, and you like all that stuff. You are much more likely to work hard to get promoted if part of your motivation is you enjoy some of the things that come with that on a personal level, if they are gratifying to you. Then it's not just getting another job title and getting a different business card. It's also, but I like doing the things that are there. So if you can find a way to add a personal component to some goal that you have, then it makes it more meaningful, and it's more likely that you will try to stick with it. The same thing is true if we flip it around. If you're a leader and you give a subordinate some kind of metric or target that they're supposed to hit, if you can find a way to blend something personal in for them as well, then that's a really great thing too. So if I'll use sales again for an example. If I'm your boss and I've told you that you have to do $1 million in sales this month, but I also feed into that, hey, and I'm going to help you learn a couple skills, and I'm going to help you learn a little bit more about this industry, and I'm going to give you some feedback on how you do, and I'm going to help develop you into a better salesperson because I really see you as someone who could lead a sales team someday. And if that's your goal, now you're more committed to the whole $1 million idea, because it's not just I have to hit my target because that's my goal, but also I'm going to get better at this, and someday I'm going to lead a team because that's what I really want to do. And there's nothing wrong with trying to find personal things for your employees in a company goal, because if you can get both of those going, where the employee says, hey, it's good for the company, but this is also good for me, and not just monetarily, whatever is something that's meaningful to them, then you're going to go a long way. So it's both. It needs to be something tangible that you can point to and say, I want to do this, but there has to be a reason why you want to do that. And whatever it is, the more personal it is, then the more likely you are to stick with it.
Do you think enough people actually ask themselves why they want to do the goals that they do? Or do you think a lot of people just do them?
Yes. Yes.
What's the best way to approach the best way to approach the why aspect of it? Is it like the Toyota 5 whys, or what's the best way to actually ask yourself?
I think it's probably the easiest way is that where did this come from? If it came from I saw something and I want to be like that person, like we talked about earlier, or that person has this and I want that, or I would like just as fancy a business card, or whatever it is. If it's a comparison thing, then in all likelihood, there's not a whole lot of personal meaning for you in it, and it's going to feel hollow when you actually get there because you were just trying to be like somebody else or have something that somebody else has. But if it came from inside you where, I don't know, we'll use marathons, where you saw one on TV and you thought, you know what, I would like to do that. I would like to be the kind of person who can do that. And it came from inside you and you were saying, I want to be that, then that's probably something that you can hang your hat on. Whereas if it's, oh yeah, my neighbor ran a marathon and, I think I should too. Well, if you're comparing, then it's probably not something with any meaning.
Yeah, I think a lot of people definitely choose goals based on that aspect. And I think the ones that I've definitely found meaningful have been the ones that I've seen someone do it, but then be like, oh, that would be cool for me to do, rather than, right, oh, look how great I am in comparison to that person because I now ran a marathon in under 3.5 hours instead of they did it in 4 or something.
Yeah, I did that Gran Fondo that I referenced earlier, and I finished, and there was like hundreds of people that were there. And when I finished, somebody gave me my little thing around my neck, and I stood there and had some drinks, not alcoholic, but just I did not drink enough during the ride, so I was a little dehydrated.
How many miles was it?
102. It was 14,000 feet of climbing. So yeah, it was awful. It was hot death. But I left within about, say, 10 minutes. And it wasn't because I was mad or upset or anything else, but I just wanted to do it. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do something really hard. And I had. And so I had no reason to hang around and, be part of the crowd. And I didn't need pictures. I didn't need anything else because I just wanted to prove to myself that I could do that. And I had, and I felt really good about the fact that I had. And so that was enough. And so that's a good example of a goal that was just for me. And I got there because it was something that was important to me that I wanted to prove to myself.
Yeah, I think the goals that validate not image, but that give you self-confidence are definitely the ones that carry you through time, because the ones that you think are going to be good for you in the future are the ones that really give you the motivation. I think it really comes down to, am I doing this because I want other people to see me a certain way, or am I doing this because I want to see myself a certain way? And if it's you want to see yourself a certain way, then it has some meaning. If it's because you want other people to think of you in a certain way, then it only has meaning really externally, and it's harder to stick with, and it will probably feel hollow when you get there because they are not going to validate you the way that you think they are going to. That's always the way, though, isn't it?
Yeah, the best validation is what comes from inside you. So you might as well seek that, because then you will get the validation that you're looking for.
Definitely. I think a great way to end this conversation, Jeff, is the book. The specific book is The Motivation Myth, and this is idea that we have this skewed belief of motivation, what it means to actually be a high achiever. What is the one takeaway that you think that most people need to have in relation to motivation to actually be high achievers in whatever they need to do or whatever they set out to do?
Whatever you set out to do has to be meaningful. It has to be something that is important to you and not necessarily to other people. Now, if it's a family thing, that's different. It can be important to your family, but it's still important to you because it's important to you to do something for your family. So it's an interesting circle. But then the other side of it is what I said in the very beginning is stop looking for motivation from the outside. Stop waiting to receive it. Stop waiting for some mentor to give it to you. Stop going to some seminar where somebody's going to fire you up and get you motivated, because that lasts about a minute. And pick something you're interested in. Pick something you think you would like to do. Find someone who has achieved that thing. Get advice and tips and a process and a routine from them. Give it 2 weeks. Give it your all during that 2 weeks, and then take a look at it and say, is this working? Have I gotten better? Is it really something I'm interested in continuing to pursue? You may decide that it's not. That's okay. But when you get to the end of that 2 weeks, you'll have some success, and you will have started that process of effort, success, gratification, fulfillment, motivation, get you to the next day. So the summary is, don't look for motivation. Create it on your own through action.
Love it. I love the summary. Thank you so much, Jeff, for taking the time to
you're
speak
welcome.
about elements
I enjoyed it.
of the book, The Motivation Myth. Where's the best place that individuals can find you, be it a website or social media? Or
I write for Inc. magazine. That's Inc.com. I am on LinkedIn. I do respond to people when they contact me. It sometimes takes me a while, but I will eventually respond. So that's probably the best way.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jeff.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to either watch or listen to this. There was so much to learn from this podcast regarding dispelling this idea of motivation, and hopefully you've come away with some tips or ideas in order to create more consistent goals, set up systems and processes in your life in order to maintain consistency, whether it be at work, any hobbies or projects that you might be going on, or if you're trying to set yourself up for your ideal life as well. It's very important to understand what drives you and how to create systems and habits. And hopefully you learn a lot from this podcast. And I definitely recommend getting the book if you found this podcast helpful. I'll put a link in the description below to get the book to my Amazon affiliate link. So if you do purchase it, then I'll get about a 5% kickback on the purchase, which I'll appreciate if you do that. Thank you so much again for watching this podcast, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next episode.